Millionaire surprises, Nanny protecting his blind daughter. What he sees leaves him speechless. The scent of Italian jasmine lingered in the cool evening air, blending with the hurried footsteps of staff echoing through a mansion of over 40,000 square feet atop Beverly Hills. The last rays of sunlight streamed through towering glass windows, falling across imported marble floors and reflecting the grandeur of a family known throughout Los Angeles, the Albrights. From the top floor of the headquarters of Albright Dynamics, Richard Albright gazed down at the city sprawling like an endless canvas of lights and ambition. For 25 years, he had transformed a small software startup into a global empire of artificial intelligence and technological infrastructure. The financial press hailed him as the architect of the digital age, while investors regarded him as a man who never lost a game. Yet on this particular afternoon, Richard's eyes carried no glint of triumph. Instead, they revealed an unease he could no longer hide. His Vertu phone buzzed with an urgent call. On the other end was Thomas, his chauffeur and loyal confidant for over 15 years. His voice trembled. "Sir Richard, Clara is having another severe episode, and Mrs. Vanessa, well, she seems unable to cope any longer." Richard tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his Bentley. His heart clenched again with a familiar pain. His only daughter, Clara, just 9 years old, had been born completely blind due to a rare condition. Since the tragic death of his wife, Emily, in a helicopter crash 4 years ago, Clara had suffered from uncontrollable anxiety attacks. Every doctor, every specialist had failed to help her. The sprawling Spanish-style mansion in Beverly Hills, nestled within one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Los Angeles, was drowning in chaos as Richard Albright drove his car through the handcrafted wrought iron gates, gates that alone were worth as much as an entire house in a less affluent district. House staff rushed nervously through the rose-stone corridors, whispering and deliberately avoiding the second floor, where disturbing sounds made Richard's stomach tighten. Vanessa Albright, his second wife of 3.5 years, descended the grand staircase, her heels striking the marble floor with sharp, gunshot-like echoes. At 36, Vanessa still carried the polished, artificial beauty that had once captivated him in the social elite. But now it radiated a disquieting chill. Her ivory Valentino gown, worth an entire year's salary for 4 of the household maids, clashed with the perfectly made-up face that nonetheless betrayed irritation. "Richard, thank goodness you're home. I have to leave immediately for the Spanish Hospital Charity Gala. Clara's condition is completely out of control. I've called Dr. Ramirez 4 times today already." Richard realized something in that instant. His wife had never once spoken his daughter's name. She always said that condition, or simply her. He asked quietly, "What happened with Clara today?" "The same as always," Vanessa replied, exasperated. She was at it again, rocking, banging against the walls. "Honestly, Richard, I think she only does it to get attention. Children are far more cunning than we give them credit for." The words struck Richard like a slap. His daughter was blind from birth. How could she possibly be pretending for attention? Before he could answer, a piercing scream from Clara Albright thundered through the grand hall, followed by the heavy crash of something striking the wall. Richard dropped his leather briefcase and bolted up the staircase, ignoring Vanessa's call after him. "Wait, sometimes it's better to let her calm herself down." Halfway up, he froze. The screams had stopped, replaced by the gentle, melodic voice of a woman singing a lullaby in Catalan. The tune overflowed with tenderness, stirring something deep in Richard's chest. Strangely, the mansion fell utterly silent. Clara was no longer crying or thrashing. "Who is singing?" Richard demanded. Vanessa sniffed dismissively. "The new maid, hired last week. Well, at least she seems to know how to quiet Clara down." He hurried toward Clara's room. The door stood slightly ajar. Through the narrow gap, Richard witnessed a sight that made his chest tighten. Clara, her face streaked with tears, sat on the wooden floor, leaning against the wall. In front of her, a woman in a simple uniform knelt low, keeping just enough distance, singing with her whole heart. Her hands moved gently, as if cradling an invisible, fragile spirit. "Do you feel better now, Clara?" the woman asked softly. Clara hesitated, her voice hoarse. "I feel better. Who are you?" "My name is Isabella. You can call me that, if you'd like." Richard stood frozen at the threshold. His daughter, who usually recoiled from strangers, was not only responding but lifting her head toward the voice as though she had found a safe harbor. Isabella smiled tenderly. "You know, I studied many languages when I was young. Italian, Spanish, French, even English. Each language has its own lullaby." "Sing another one," Clara whispered, her small hand unconsciously reaching forward. Richard felt his throat tighten. How long had it been since Clara reached out to anyone? Richard gently pushed the door wider. The hinges creaked softly, yet Clara did not flinch as she usually did. Instead, she tilted her head as if listening intently to Isabella's every breath. The woman sat upright, her dark eyes carrying depths of experience, her calm face shadowed by an unnamed sorrow. "Thank you," Richard whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know how, but Clara has stopped crying." Isabella bowed her head slightly, her demeanor humble. "Sir, I have no magic. I only know how to listen." Richard stepped into the room, taking a seat near the window, his gaze locked on his daughter. Clara still held her hand out into the empty air, clinging to the fragile thread that tied her to the world. "Where did you learn those songs?" Richard asked. "In Barcelona," Isabella replied. "I taught languages for many years. My students came from everywhere: Spain, France, Italy, even Mexico. I always believed that music and language are two doors that open straight into a child's heart." Richard blinked in surprise. "So you were a teacher?" Isabella nodded softly. 17 years in Europe, then 6 years in Mexico. But that career, it ended when I lost my only daughter." The air in the room grew heavier. Clara sat quietly, her sharp ears sensing the shift in Isabella's tone. She whispered, "You had a daughter?" Isabella smiled, but the curve of her lips carried immeasurable grief. "Yes, her name was Lucia. She was special, just like you. Lucia was born with cerebral palsy and autism. Doctors said she would never read, never write, never care for herself. But Lucia taught me that miracles happen when we refuse to believe in limits." Clara tilted her head, her lips trembling. "Is she still with you?" A long silence followed. Then Isabella answered softly, "Lucia left me. She passed away when she was 14. But before she went, she left me a treasure: patience, courage, and the belief that every child is its own universe worthy of love." Richard felt his eyes sting. He knew that kind of loss all too well. Since the day Emily was taken from him in the accident, he had never found true comfort. And now, before him stood a woman who had endured the same kind of pain. Yet instead of collapsing, she had turned her grief into light for others. Clara turned toward the warm voice. "Do you think I'm as special like your daughter was?" Isabella placed her hand on her chest, her voice firm yet gentle. "Clara, you're not only special, you are a gift. The world may not see it yet, but one day everyone will know you carry something that few others ever could." In that moment, Richard felt something stir inside him, something he had long forgotten: hope. "Isabella," Clara suddenly said, "will you stay here with me until Dad finishes his work?" "If your father agrees," Isabella glanced at Richard. "Of course," Richard replied immediately. "In fact, I'd like to talk with you more about Clara. About many things." "It would be my honor, sir," Isabella answered softly. Back in his office, Richard couldn't concentrate on the reports in front of him. His mind kept drifting upstairs to the scene he had just witnessed. By 5 in the afternoon, rather than burying himself in spreadsheets, he found himself climbing the staircase again, drawn by the sound of laughter from Clara's room. The sight stopped him cold. Clara sat on her bed, her face radiant with joy, laughing, a sound Richard hadn't heard in more than a year, while Isabella spun a tale about an Italian prince. The little girl, who usually kept to herself, was now eagerly engaged, asking questions and giggling. "So, what did the prince do next?" Clara asked in Italian, leaving Richard stunned. "You speak Italian?" he asked in disbelief. "A little," Clara admitted shyly. "Mama Emily taught me some words before she went to heaven." Richard's heart clenched. Emily had been fluent in Italian from her university exchange program in Rome. She often spoke to Clara in both languages. But after her passing, Clara had never used Italian again. Isabella fell silent for a long moment, visibly moved. "Your mother must have been an extraordinary woman to teach you such beautiful things." "She was," Clara said sadly. "She sang to me the way you sing. Vanessa doesn't." "Vanessa cares for you in a different way." Isabella tried to soften her words. "Vanessa doesn't love me. She thinks I'm a burden." The simple statement hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. He knew he needed to have a serious conversation with his wife. But first, he wanted to understand Isabella better, why her presence alone had brought such profound change to his daughter. That night, for the first time in weeks, Clara fell asleep without needing sedatives. Passing by the library, Richard found Isabella quietly arranging books on the shelves. "Isabella, I have a proposal," he began. "Yes?" She looked up. "I'd like to hire you as Clara's private tutor. The pay will be far higher than your current position. You would have complete freedom to design educational and recreational activities suited to her needs." Isabella fell silent, her face torn with visible emotion. "Sir, your offer is very generous, but would Vanessa agree?" "Vanessa will have to accept what is best for Clara," Richard answered with more firmness than he had intended. "I'll think about it overnight," Isabella nodded slowly. "Very well, but why the hesitation?" he pressed gently. For the first time, Isabella looked him directly in the eyes. "Because taking care of Clara means becoming attached to her, and after losing Lucia, I fear my heart might not survive another break." Her honesty struck Richard deeply. He understood that fear all too well, the fear of loving again after devastation. "Here, Clara will always be safe and loved," he said, his voice steady. "Anyone who brings happiness to her will always be welcome." Isabella's lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "In that case, I accept, sir." In the days that followed, the atmosphere within the Albright mansion began to change. A place once accustomed only to distant footsteps and heavy silence now resonated with new sounds. Soft laughter, the faint hum of piano keys, and small conversations that carried deep meaning. Isabella never tried to act as a doctor or therapist. She simply stayed by Clara's side with the patience of someone who had already endured darkness herself. In the mornings, as the first light streamed through the tall windows, she prepared breakfast with fruit cut into shapes of flowers and butterflies. For the first time, Clara reached out to touch each slice of mango, each piece of strawberry, exclaiming as if she had uncovered a secret. "This one's a butterfly wing, and this one's a flower." Isabella smiled. "Exactly. Food isn't just for eating. It's for touching, for exploring with all your senses." From a distance, Richard watched his daughter not just eat, but discover, as if life itself were slowly opening new doors for her. In the afternoons, Isabella guided Clara through the garden. She showed her how to gently touch rosemary, basil, and mint leaves, then breathe deeply. Clara quickly declared, This one smells like Dad's toothpaste. It has to be mint. Isabella laughed. You have an extraordinary memory for scents, Clara. That's a superpower. Clara drew in a proud breath, her cheeks glowing with delight. The word superpower became her refrain, something she repeated each time she mastered something new. Just then, Vanessa appeared in the backyard. Clara, inside. It's time for your medication. Clara sighed, the joy draining from her face. So soon? Yes, soon, Vanessa snapped. And you're filthy. Isabella, I thought you kept her cleaner than this. Dirt is part of the natural lesson, ma'am. It washes off, Isabella replied calmly. I don't want Clara playing in the dirt. It spreads disease and teaches bad habits. Dirt isn't filth. It's the foundation of life itself. My own daughter used to play in the soil every day and was perfectly fine. Your daughter isn't Clara, Vanessa retorted, her tone deliberately cruel. True, Isabella said softly. My daughter never had the privilege of growing up in such a beautiful garden to explore as Clara does. She turned the sting into a gentle reminder of the child's blessings. Come along, Clara. After your medicine, you can watch television. May I come back outside with Isabella afterward? Clara asked hopefully. We'll see. Clara's shoulders slumped as she stepped toward Vanessa, her body language that of a child already accustomed to expecting reproach. That evening, when Richard returned from a meeting, he found Vanessa in the living room with a glass of red wine, her face cold and sharp. Richard, she began, her voice like a blade, do you realize what's happening in this house? That child Clara is becoming more and more dependent on that maid. She believes she has superpowers, that she can do anything. It's a dangerous fantasy. Richard frowned. Vanessa, that's not fantasy. Clara is improving. She's laughing, learning, playing music. Don't you see? Vanessa gave a bitter laugh. You're so naive. These games only spoil her further. Clara needs discipline. She needs to understand her limits, not live in delusions. Limits? Richard repeated, his voice dropping. My daughter is not a burden. She only needs love and support. Vanessa slammed the glass down, the crimson liquid spilling across the table like a stain of blood. Don't you get it? She's suffocating our lives. All the panic attacks, the endless screaming, and now this maid who thinks she has the right to interfere. I've already called the doctor. Clara will take sedatives 3 times a day. At least then we'll have some peace. Richard shot to his feet. Sedatives? You decided this without telling me? Vanessa lifted her chin, her eyes flashing with defiance. Someone has to do what needs to be done. You're too weak to face the truth. Clara is not normal, and the sooner you accept that, the easier our lives will be. The door opened quietly. Isabella stepped in, clutching a stack of music sheets. It was clear she had heard enough. Her voice remained calm, but her eyes burned with an unshakable conviction. Forgive me, Mrs. Vanessa, but Clara doesn't need medicine to be silenced. She needs someone to listen, a space to learn how to face the world, to call difference a disease. That is what truly breaks a child. For a moment, the living room was swallowed in heavy silence. Richard looked at Vanessa, then at Isabella. He knew a greater confrontation was on the horizon, and this family would never be the same again. After the heated argument in the living room, Richard thought he had braced himself for the worst. But what he overheard a few days later stunned him beyond measure. That night, arriving home earlier than usual, Richard caught Vanessa's voice drifting from the upstairs study. He froze outside the half-closed door. Inside, she was on the phone with her mother, her tone tense but calculated. Mother, this situation is unbearable. That child Clara is being manipulated by the maid. She believes she's talented, that she can play music, learn languages, when in reality she'll never be normal. Richard is completely blind to it. If this continues, the whole house will collapse. A pause, then Vanessa continued. I'll have to make a choice. Either Isabella leaves or I do. And honestly, I think Clara should be placed in a specialized institution. At least there she'll have real professionals, not some failed woman using the child to mask her grief over losing her own daughter. Blood pounded in Richard's temples. Every word Vanessa spoke cut like a blade. He stepped back, forcing down his fury. But deep inside, he knew. The truth had become undeniable. Vanessa had never truly loved Clara. To her, the child was nothing more than an obstacle. Downstairs, Richard sat alone in his study, a cigar trembling between his fingers, though he never lit it. His mind spun between two choices: preserve a crumbling marriage for the sake of perfect appearances in high society, or protect his daughter at all costs, even if it meant destruction. He remembered Clara laughing in the garden, her tiny hand brushing mint leaves, proudly declaring she had a superpower. He remembered Isabella's face, calm, yet carrying the strength of someone who had turned grief into light. Vanessa walked into his study and said, "Maybe I'm not the right person to raise a child with special needs. You should consider placing her in a specialized institution." "Cherty, you want me to send my daughter away?" Richard asked, his voice hardening. "I'm saying what's best for her," Vanessa replied coolly. "What's best for her is a family that loves her and believes in her. And our family?" Vanessa's silence lingered. Then Richard spoke with finality. "If you cannot love my daughter, then perhaps this marriage is already over." With that, Vanessa picked up her suitcase and walked out of the house. "When you're ready to face reality, call me," she said over her shoulder before leaving. The next morning, Richard felt clearer than he had in years. He knew exactly what needed to be done. In the kitchen, Isabella was carefully preparing breakfast. "Where's Clara?" he asked. "She's still asleep," Isabella answered gently. "Yesterday was full of new experiences. I thought she should rest a little longer." "Isabella, I need to tell you this. Last night, before I came home, I overheard Vanessa on the phone. She was talking about placing Clara in an institution, and she gave me an ultimatum. Either you leave, or she does." Isabella sighed, as if she had expected this all along, though it still pained her. "And your decision?" "Clara stays. You stay. Vanessa. That will be her choice." "Are you certain? Marriage is serious, and I don't want to be—" "You bear no responsibility for that," Richard interrupted firmly. "Your only role is to bring joy and growth to my daughter. The problems in my marriage were there long before you. You simply help me see them clearly." 4 weeks later, Vanessa called and asked to meet. They met at her mother's apartment. "You look more at ease," Vanessa said. "Thank you," Richard replied. "I've thought a lot about us. We're stuck, and I don't think we can fix it. You want me to be the kind of mother who loves Clara, who celebrates every step forward, who believes in great hope." "I can't." "You can't?" Richard pressed. "No. What I see is a child who will always need special care, who will always be different, who will always limit our life together. I know it sounds cruel, but it's the truth. Clara doesn't limit our lives. She expands them in ways you don't see," Richard said firmly. "That's the difference between us," Vanessa answered. "You see expansion where I see limits. You see potential where I see problems. I can't change how I see it. So what do you propose?" "We separate, peacefully, no lawsuits. You stay with Clara and your miracles. I'll start over, maybe with a normal family." "I agree," Richard said after a long pause. "We both deserve happiness, and clearly we cannot find it together." They settled the division of assets. Vanessa would keep the downtown apartment and a sum of money sufficient to start anew. The main house would remain with Richard and Clara, the place where his daughter felt safe. By 6 months, the divorce papers were finalized. Summer passed, and the Albright mansion seemed reborn. Clara grew ever brighter, more confident. The sound of piano filled each afternoon, mingled with laughter from the garden, transforming what had once been a somber home into one alive with new energy. Richard found himself looking for reasons to come home earlier just to witness small moments. Isabella teaching Clara to tie her shoes, or the two of them reading Braille together under the warm glow of a lamp. These simple scenes touched the deepest corners of his heart. One evening, after Clara had fallen asleep, Richard found Isabella in the library, arranging stacks of sheet music. He stepped inside, hesitated, then said, "Isabella, you've transformed Clara's life, this home, and mine," Richard said softly. "Isabella, I've fallen in love with you. I love the way you care for Clara, the wisdom you've brought into our family, and the incredible woman you are. You don't need to answer me now. I just wanted you to know." Isabella fell silent, her eyes glistening. "I have feelings for you too, but I need to be sure this isn't just gratitude, loneliness, or convenience." "Then let time answer," Richard smiled gently. "We'll let everything grow naturally, without pressure. Clara will always be the priority. If something real blooms between us, it will endure, because it's built on that foundation." "You're always so wise," Isabella whispered in reply. That night, Richard left the library with a lighter heart. He was not seeking an immediate answer, but in Isabella's eyes, he had seen a glimmer, a light hinting at a new future, not only for Clara, but for himself as well. 1 year after the divorce, Richard surprised everyone by proposing during a family piano recital performed by Clara. When the last note of Debussy hung in the air, trembling like light on water, Richard rose to his feet. "2 years ago, an extraordinary woman stepped into our lives," he began. "Isabella not only saved my daughter from a life unfairly defined by limits, but she also taught me that a true family is built on love, acceptance, and unwavering faith in the potential of those we hold dear." Then he knelt down, opening a velvet box. "Isabella Romero, will you marry me and officially become the mother of the incredible young lady Clara is becoming?" "Say yes, Isabella!" Clara shouted, her voice carrying across the hall and making the entire audience burst into laughter. "How could I possibly say no to such a beautiful proposal?" Isabella replied, holding out her hand. Richard slipped the ring onto her finger. A month later, the wedding took place in the family garden, beneath an arch of blooming roses. There was no grand banquet, no hundreds of guests, only a handful of loved ones, soft music, and an atmosphere overflowing with love. Clara, in a little white dress, sat at the piano and played the wedding march herself. As Richard and Isabella walked hand in hand down the flower-strewn aisle, Clara's music rang bright and clear, a blessing from the very heart of a child who had endured sorrow and now found true joy. That wedding marked not only the beginning of a marriage, but affirmed a greater truth. Family is not forged by blood, but by those who choose to love, protect, and walk together through every trial. In Richard's embrace, under Clara's radiant smile, Isabella knew she had finally found a home, not just to live, but to love, to be loved, and to truly call family. After the warm wedding in the garden, the Albright family stepped into a brand new chapter of life. The mansion, once shadowed by sorrow, was now filled with light, the sound of piano, birdsong, and a child's laughter blending into a symphony of happiness. Richard changed more than anyone could have imagined. The man who once spent nearly all his time in boardrooms now chose to work remotely, setting up his office in a room overlooking the garden. From his mahogany desk, with sun pooling on the floor and the faint scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen, he reviewed files while listening to Clara practicing, or to Isabella humming as she moved about the stove. For the first time, he was truly present in his own home. Joy arrived a year into their marriage. Isabella was pregnant. When the doctor confirmed it, Richard clasped his wife's hand, his eyes brimming with emotion. He had never thought that after so much loss, he would again be blessed with such a miracle. Clara was the happiest of all. Each day she sat beside her mother, her small hands resting gently on the growing curve of her belly. She spoke endlessly to the baby. "Hello, it's Clara. I'll teach you how to play the piano and how to smell the roses and mint in the garden. You have to promise to listen, okay?" Isabella smiled, stroking her daughter's hair. "He's listening, Clara, and thanks to you, he'll know he's welcomed with love." Richard often stood quietly in the doorway, watching. His heart overflowed with gratitude for Clara's renewed joy, for Isabella's steady love, and for the family that had finally been restored. As the months passed, anticipation grew. Clara counted the weeks, the days, each morning asking, "Daddy, how much longer until the baby comes?" Richard always chuckled, pulling her close. "Very soon, Princess, very soon." And then the moment arrived. On a spring morning, Isabella gave birth to a healthy baby boy. His first cry echoed through the house like a triumphant announcement of life. Richard held his wife, tears streaming down his face. Clara was led into the room, her steps slow but eager. Isabella placed the baby in Richard's arms, then carefully guided Clara closer. She reached out, her fingers trembling as they traced the newborn's tiny features, the button nose, the soft lips, the velvet skin. Clara whispered, her voice breaking with wonder, He's so handsome." The room fell silent, then erupted with laughter and tears. Richard kissed his daughter's forehead, murmuring, "You were right, sweetheart. He is our precious gift." From that day forward, life in the Albright home was no longer marked by loneliness or grief. It was a haven where differences were cherished, where every voice mattered. Clara continued her piano practice, often with her baby brother in a cradle nearby, listening to each note she played. Isabella, with patience and love, nurtured both children while guiding Clara in her journey of discovery. Richard, though still leading his company remotely, made his family his highest priority. Dinners together, afternoons in the garden, bedtime stories. They no longer needed validation from the outside world. The truth was clear enough. Family is not defined by blood, but by the daily choice to love. And in that home, filled with the sound of piano, laughter, and a newborn's babble, their story stood as living proof that true love can heal the deepest wounds, banish the darkest shadows, and ignite a legacy that will endure forever. In the end, the story of the Albright family is not about wealth, power, or even survival. It is about the quiet miracles born from love. Richard discovered that true strength is not measured in boardrooms, but in bedtime stories, in gentle patience, and in the courage to protect his daughter at all costs. Isabella proved that pain can be transformed into light, guiding not only Clara, but an entire home into hope. And Clara herself, through her laughter, music, and her superpower, reminded everyone that limits exist only when we choose to believe in them. Their journey reveals a simple yet eternal truth. Family is not defined by blood, perfection, or appearances. Family is the daily choice to love, the decision to stay, the faith to believe in one another. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Love truly has the power to change the world.